Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Endangered Species Unapologetically. I am your host, Devon Morris, and today we're going to talk about a topic that is going to continually come up. But before we talk about that topic, I need you to go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, whether it is on YouTube or another platform like Spotify, Apple, Google. Pick your platform and just join us as we dive into these conversations every single week. So today's topic, and again, it will come up again and again and again because it is about defunding the police. Defunding the police. Now, it's interesting because it's in the news a lot. And as we continue into this campaign season where, we have a lot of votes that will be happening in the next few months in terms of the presidency, state and local, you find all kinds of elections that are happening, all the way through November timeframe. So if you're going to vote, get yourself registered. Your opinions on voting, I understand. It is what it is. But if you're going to vote, get on in there, get yourself registered, and make sure you show up to the polls. Now, that being said, last week on September the 11th, there was a memorial in New Jersey, and Lieutenant Governor Shelley Oliver out of New Jersey basically gave a speech at the memorial on 9/11 where she specifically said, "We will never defund you." Now, whether it was to the people in the audience or people that were streaming, she really jumped out there to say that. Now, this is a successful, strong Black woman that put that out there and said that. And I say that because, again, that's the perspective that I come from. Now, in hearing that coming out of her mouth, do I have an opinion one way or the other? Do I feel a way about it? I don't. Everybody will have their opinion. But it is something that is becoming more emotionally charged. Okay? Now, a few days ago, right down in Austin, okay, you had an organization, police associated organization. Their name is the Texas Municipal Police Association. Put up a couple of billboards. One of them said, "Warning, Austin police defunded. Enter at your own risk." Okay, now that's a sign, probably on I-35, right? But this is warning, Austin police defunded, enter at your own risk. And then there's another sign that says limited support next 20 miles. Now that's a clear statement. That's a very, very clear statement. And what are they responding to? They're actually responding to the city of Austin, the city council of Austin actually slashed the budget by $150 million. Now, I don't know what percentage of the budget that is. I could have researched and dove into that a little bit more. But I know that $21 million is going to directly be, kind of pushed in a separate direction, right? So that happened in August. So this organization responded in that way. Now, that's interesting because that has sparked a lot of controversy around the state. And you have, various officials chiming in. You have people nationally chiming in to something that Austin has done. But Austin is the city that says keep Austin weird. Austin is a very unique city. Austin has I really like Austin. I really do. Austin is just one of those cities that when you go there, you kind of love it, especially if you like to see people of different opinions. And I always like places where there's a bunch of wonderful, great brains that are actively trying to solve problems and doing things. Even though you would consider to be like a high technology place because of places like Dale and everything else, but Austin is an interesting place because I always would drive right through Austin in terms of going down to San Antonio from Dallas to San Antonio. And I-35 Austin, traffic's horrible, right? So if you're defunding the police to to make the roads better, make them wider, I'd be really happy, right? But that being said, that's for naught. But the idea is that these signs were put up on billboards, right? As a direct reaction to the city council. Now, the statement is they are taking that money and they're putting it toward other things, okay? Now, I don't know if all of that money is going toward other things, but it's not like the money has gone poof. And where they taking it from in terms of the police, I have no clue. I have absolutely no clue, right? You probably have to go look at their records and see what they truly voted on and how they're going to handle that. And they probably have that recorded somewhere and publicly available for everybody to take access to. So if you're interested in that, go take a look at the city of Austin City Council, in the month of August. I can't tell you any specific dates. But again, it has sparked some concern and it has sparked some excitement. It's gone in a few different ways. And a city like Austin is a city where I love to see an experiment like that, right? Because if they can get it right, it's a great place where a model like that will actually work. Whatever they're deciding to do, and I don't know what it is. But I know that they're wonderful and great people, and they're smart, right? So they'll try to figure that one out. Now, that right there is interesting because, last week, so the month of September, you had the Dallas Police Department get pinched, defunded with a pinch, right? So, there's battles or there's arguments in the public right now, where the Dallas city officials are saying we did not defund the police, but they actually took $7 million of overtime pay, and they're redirecting those funds toward other things, right? Now, again, is that defunding the police? Technically speaking, by the letter of the law, I'll say, yeah, it's defunding the police, okay? But technically, could you say to me, they're taking away overtime, at least money for overtime? Could I say that's defunding the police? No, that doesn't necessarily say that you're pulling away a program or you're taking money out of this particular established thing that the police had, unless having overtime is an established thing, right? So now that has led to something in the state of Texas, which is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. That has led to the Governor Abbott, really, really going in hard, trying to put laws or something in place to make sure that cities in Texas do not defund the police, because obviously he does not support that, okay? Which is interesting because the most liberal city in Texas is Austin. So them taking that step is why I would expect to see it happening. And to see it kind of sort of happen in Dallas-Fort Worth, especially since the mayor of Dallas-Fort Worth is, the mayor of Dallas. To say Dallas and Fort Worth is a problem because that's two really distinctly different cities, okay? They got their own governing bodies and everything else. So Dallas, okay? The mayor of Dallas is Eric Johnson, right? Used to be in the state senate. And he's actually the mayor of Dallas at this particular point in time. And he's a black gentleman, right? And so, smart guy. I've had a conversation or two with him. And so it's interesting to see how these things and these watches are happening over time. And not to mention that, Dallas has one of the oldest black chamber of commerces. It may have been the first, one of the first that exist in the United States. And so there's a real historical black thing here in Dallas, right? So that's, another one of those things that I find to be extremely, extremely interesting. Okay. But you see in Austin, you see in Dallas, you see these things happening. In Dallas, you got a black leader here. And then in Austin's just a liberal city. Keep Austin weird. Just love going to Austin, right? So will that happen in places like San Antonio? There's like a lot more military, family-based town. Houston, a lot of oil down there, but a big contingent of black folk, minorities, dead smack in Houston. Like the other parts of Texas almost don't seem like they exist, right? But they do. I'm not saying anything against any other part of Texas, right? But the idea is that they're probably way more conservative. And so seeing these things happen in these areas seem to make sense. But Governor Abbott is not happy whatsoever. Now, realistically, the hashtag defund the police was something that I saw press forward with George Floyd. Just really pressed forward with George Floyd. And it was pressed forward with him because when you see like literally people that's supposed to be properly trained, right? But let's say properly trained police officers, kind of knee on the neck for real, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds on George Floyd's neck. That's just takes you to a whole nother level. So you definitely started seeing that whole hashtag defund the police movement coming out of Minneapolis, right? And then it just kind of contingent just happening in various places. And, I see that happening in conjunction now more and more with the Black Lives Matter movement. And so it is one of those things that when you look at it, I just go, that would be interesting. Because the question becomes, what's next? You defund the police, and then what's going to happen next? What is the next thing to tackle? Or how do you deal with the state of affairs? Because, when it comes to crime, and this is not crime based on race. When it comes to crime in general, crime in many ways is opportunistic. Opportunistic. If you know that there's a place that exists where you can exploit something and get away without having to suffer the consequences of what you exploited, then, crime can happen. Okay. So it is interesting. And it's one of those things where when you think about defund the police, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, complete abolition of the police, right? Or you're just going to take percentages of funds away over time down to a base bare bone thing, right? Now, realistically, when I think about that whole abolition movement, I don't think this is as popular, but it could get wings. I don't see any reason why it can't get wings. And the reason why that exists is because realistically, the role of the police is to protect and serve. But when it comes to the black community, does the police really keep us safe? Is that their role? Or is their role really to protect property? Well, really, when I say protect property, I'm really saying protect the establishment. Because really, in the annos of time, police were there to protect something that's in existence. If you're living on a nomadic culture, you don't have police. You individually take care of things, right? But it's normally there to protect the establishment, whatever that establishment is. You call it property, or you want to call it something else, or somebody hires somebody privately to look out for this set of entities, particular night watch, just day watch, just all those kind of things. It is to protect the establishment, right? But what happens if you are the minority in that establishment? Because as the minority in the establishment, especially here in America, we would be like the cancer. We'd be like the cancer that and the police is kind of like the chemotherapy, right? That's kind of the way, if I'm an abolitionist, I'm looking at it, right? You know, they treat us like we're the cancer, and the police is going to be the chemotherapy, and they are going to keep, you know, radiating and radiating and radiating and radiating, right? Killing some of us, right? Not being that concerned about it whatsoever. It's just a part of the process. While the majority here, you know, it is for them, the police is enabling. It is their protection. It kind of keeps the cancer away. Make sure that the rules that are set in place are there, and that those rules totally align with making sure that their lives are better, easier, maintained, or become better over time. So as an abolitionist, okay, I'm thinking to myself, interesting. Now, the reason why I say that is because I know already that we're 12 to 15% of the population. I don't know what the number is today. And in being 12 to 50% of the population, we are over 40% of the federal and state prisons. Is disproportionately black men. Disproportionately. Okay? So when you have us being over 40% of that, what has classically happened over the years is that they put some rule in place, and then the police protect that rule, and they add other rules on top of that, and they protect that rule, and they find ways to get rid of the cancer by policing them and putting them in prison. Okay? Because early on, really, the true establishment of the police, beyond just the neighborhood night watch, had everything to do with slavery, had everything to do with things that came up out of the South. Okay? And we'll talk about that history, you know, in a little bit, but the idea remains the same. Okay? Now, what is defunding the police? Defunding the police really supports the actual movement or divestment of funds from the police department and reallocating them towards something else. The abolitionists would say, let's take 100% of those funds and reallocate them towards something else. While people that generally, the majority of the people that are saying defund the police, they're not necessarily talking about 100% because they believe that some contingent of the police need to exist. It's just that we need to redirect funds toward other things. Like, a wonderful example, right? In terms of thinking about Daniel Prude, Azale Ford, or anybody else who has met an untimely death due to the police, right? Due to this state of unfairness, right? Thinking about them is interesting because wouldn't it be fair to redirect some of those police funds toward mental health initiatives, okay, that can better deal with mental health issues? So I was reading about the Dallas City Council defunding and taking that overtime pay, and they're going to use it to employ some people to help put up better lighting and do things in the community, yada, things that are going to help the community have alternatives for policing, right? But if I think to myself, is it such a bad thing to establish some entity that can help with mental health issues? Well, that money doesn't come out of the taxpayer's pocket because, again, we're taxed. No question. We're taxed, okay? But when that money doesn't come out of the pockets of the everyday citizen once again, because we're already paying for the police, where that money is redirected, right, into initiatives that will help us better be able to deal with people who have mental issues, especially when there is a need to have someone who is well trained help to deal with the circumstances at hand, instead of it being, a loved one calling and then their loved one dies because they called, right? When you see a Daniel Prude, somebody who was butt naked, right, and they restrained him or had a restraining device or something happened where he ultimately died, right? Having another place to call that could come provide some help, I don't see any issue with that. Now, do I think that gets rid of, jobs out of the police department? I don't, because I think that the police department probably has people that if they're not trained to be able to do that, they could be trained to do that, or even assist people that know how to do that in some kind of way. Okay? So if that was in place in Rochester, New York, maybe there would be a hashtag, no hashtag, or no hashtag whatsoever when it comes to Daniel Prude. Maybe I wouldn't even know his name. I would literally prefer not to know his name, because in knowing his name, he's become that hashtag, right? But if there was some service that was in place that could actually have helped him. Now, for me, that would be great use of defunded money. Okay? Now, am I thinking to myself, this could be abused? It can be abused, right? Police are people, right? They're people, right? But they're people, and we talk Blue Lives Matter, but Blue Lives is just a blue shirt. They're part of All Lives Matter, period. Their lives matter, okay? But to say that they're properly trained to deal with those situations, I can't say that's right. I can't say yes or no to that, right? I don't feel like they are, but there's no way that every case goes wrong, okay? It just doesn't happen that way. So I kind of go through, my gyrations of thinking about this back and forth because it does concern me. Where does a lot of violence actually happen? A lot of violence happens between our younger people. Let's just say 17 to 25, right? It's probably where the majority of violence happens at. Let's just say a higher percentage. What if some money was defunded from the police to help with initiatives that would allow economic empowerment, that would allow to help change young people's self-worth? Would that be a good way to defund and kind of change things? Because the problem is that when we run these experiments, we really don't know what the real world result is until maybe a decade later. Okay? Then we start seeing the impacts truly of these things. Yeah, it's just kind of interesting. Okay? So really when I think about defunding the police, I'm not thinking complete abolition. When I think about defunding the police, I think about all kinds of things. I think about accountability, right? What happens because I believe that a lot of police departments get federal funds. How much? I don't know. But what if the feds decided to withhold federal funds if you're not doing the right thing? So if you have a bunch of complaints, or you have, people who are known vile racists, or you have people who are killing people like this, I guarantee you that if you were going to defund the police by eliminating federal funds, I guarantee you that the heads of those precincts, the heads of the chief of the police department for that particular city, I guarantee you that they would start immediately getting rid of the bad apples, and over time changing the systemic problem that exists in the orchard. Okay? Because I just believe that money talks. Money talks, because that's how people get paid. And when you start messing with people's livelihood, it's a whole different statement. It's just like, it's one of those things where I understand we protect our own, but I remember with both of them, John. And I think the lady's name was Amber Geiger, something like that. She was off duty. She was off duty, completely off duty. If the police was protecting her, if the police directed any funds toward her whatsoever, then what should happen is the feds should remove all funds from the Dallas Police Department. Now, interesting that I say that, because I don't know what happened in terms of how she was funded and stuff like that. But here's the deal. Any off-duty police officer is off duty. Them being off duty means that they should live by the laws of the rest of the citizens, period. Now, if you're not a police officer, you walk into somebody's house, shoot them, you're going to have a problem. Now, we could say maybe it's manslaughter or whatever, but you're going to have a problem. You're not going to get any special treatment. And she got special treatment. No question, she got some special treatment. But a police department that supports that is a problem. Matter of fact, if I'm correct, the chief of police here in Dallas resigned recently. It's a black woman at that. So if you start to just kind of pull back and think about it, right? Now, if I am thinking about, well, it wasn't the police that supported her, it was organizations that are tangentially associated with the police. So now that I ask myself, why should you as a police officer support those kind of organizations? The kind of organizations that are going to support an off-duty officer that clearly was in the wrong. And at best case for them, manslaughter. At best case, right? Manslaughter. Okay? You didn't mean to do it. Somehow you did it, and that's it, right? You know, why would you even support them? Because I know if it's me and I see that kind of situation, I'm kind of like, I don't want to fund them anymore. They're not getting my dues. You understand? But the reason why you continue to get them your dues is because you want them to fight for you in the same way. If this kind of thing occurs to you, unfortunately. Oh, man. You know, the facts of that case was very, very interesting. But it just points back to a simple fact that I have a police officer who's an active policeman. We're not talking about somebody who was fired or anything like that or had retired from the police, like, you know, in many other cases that exist that the black lives that people get involved in, right? So it's like, wow, what if that was the case? Okay. So in terms of defunding, there's many ways to defund. There's many programs that probably, probably need to be dusted off because many policies associated with policing, right, communities are stale. They're old. Okay? They're not effective. Or better yet, let me not even say they're not effective. Let me scratch that, right? I won't say that. What I could say to you is this. They're not being held accountable for achieving goals. So then I would say something a little bit different. What if we had a situation where an independent body could evaluate the functions of a police of a particular area, right? Evaluate them like I would do in business, based on goals and objectives, right? Because I know if I have a program and it ain't working, it's costing me money and I don't see any fruits from it, then I'm probably not going to continue to fund it very long. I'm not going to fund it very long because money's going down the tube. For what reason? I don't know. I don't know. So now if we was able to truly evaluate it like it's a business, I guarantee you we could find, places where we could skim off of and establish mental health initiatives. And there could be some that exist, right? There could be some that exist, right? There could be some that exist. I don't know. Be nice to look at. I'm going to have to talk to some of my police officer friends and find out. I know a few, right? So defunding the police could concern a lot of people. But I wouldn't imagine that there's anybody that complains about more public safety outside of the police department and more community support, right? I guarantee you that the rank and file police officers that are out on the street every day, right? I guarantee you that they would love to have more public safety initiatives and more community support, right? That would be an amazing thing. It's kind of one of those things that sometimes when you look at, some of these mayors, like, in Chicago, Lori Lightfoot, right? I really like Lori Lightfoot. I'm telling you, man. When when this COVID thing was going on, man, she was like the best of mayors because she literally, I wish I was in Chicago because I wish I had voted for her, man. If I was in Chicago, I definitely would have voted for her. But she's funny, man, because literally the way she was going off, she was going off like some black lady. Like, y'all know better. Y'all know better. Let me put you on punishment. I'm shutting down the lake. I'm shutting down the lake. Period. It was rough, man. And then the thing is that, you look at your friends on Facebook and like, my friends are a heck of a lot from Chicago, right? And so you see everybody with a picture of Lori Lightfoot standing there, arms folded, like, you better not. I clearly remember that. And people putting that on their pictures and everything else, especially when she shut down a lake. Like, for real. She wasn't playing. She wasn't joking. Like, y'all gonna party like this? No more lakefront. So, yeah, that was hilarious. But the thing that I noticed about her that was interesting in terms of when she became mayor, and literally she didn't come out with blanket support, like just blanket support of the police department. She did not. She did not. Now, does she support the police department? Yes. But she did not come out with this blind support of the police department. Now, that says a lot. That says a lot. That says a whole lot. Does it say a lot about her believing in the police department? I think it does. But I think it's more like this, right? I would never believe that she's against the police department. What I would believe is that she sees some of the behaviors that have been associated with the police department, and she's not comfortable with some of the things that she's seen. I think that would be a fair statement to say, And, and you look at her, she's little, just, and she got pictures with Nelson Mandela. It's just like this person has had all these wonderful little great things that happen in life. So I really do like Lori. So you're doing well, look, I think you're doing a good job. I don't know if you're really doing a good job because I'm not in there, but I ask my friends whether you're doing a good job or not. But it's a tough year for you in Chicago, for real. For real. And the reason why I say that is because you coming up on 500 homicides, murders, right? And so that is kind of hitting 1974, 1992. Like in 1974, there was like 970, 75 murders in 1974. And in 1992, there was like 935, 40, something like that. I don't think this year will catch up, right? I don't think this year will get there, right? But August was one of the worst on record for Chicago. So, it's interesting because the police ain't stopping that. We have, these state things that are happening where the police have shot people, Laquan McDonald, that obviously it was unnecessary. When you see a guy in the city streets of Chicago get shot, and get shot several times, and you see his body twist. Like, man, like, wow. When you have somebody like Betty Jones who gets shot, like almost through somebody else, like wow. Don't that bullet that come out of your gun, aren't you accountable for that? Oh, I forgot. You shot it while you was on duty as the police, so you don't have to account for that bullet. Nah, man, that's not the way that it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to work that way. Okay? So it's just one of those interesting things that, I sit back and I think about, and it goes back to what I support: complete abolishment of the police. Like, let's completely abolish them. Or just defunding. Now, if I take a position today, I'm dead square in the camp of defunding. Now, whether that is a minimal amount, like a fraction of a percentage, I'm in support of a fraction of a fraction of a percentage. Because there are definitely some wonderful police departments. All police departments are not horrible. There are some police departments that hold people accountable within the system. There's not this blue veil, right? There's not this veil of protectionist there. So I think anybody, any organization, any person, anybody should have threat of losing something. And when I think about defund the police, I think about it as the threat of losing something. It is the only logical way that I can think about policing the police. It's through money. It's through the way the policemen operate. Do I support complete abolition of the police, though? I can't say I do. I actually don't. I don't support that. Now, I understand the history. I really do understand the history. And if you think about not any place else, United States of America in particular, right? You know, you can go all the way to, if you think about how the police formed over time. You know, if you go back to Boston, I think it is 1636. They created a night watch. Now, I think of a night watch as somebody realistically outside, like a neighborhood crime watch, right? So a neighborhood watch, right? You know, but there was problems with that kind of system, right? So, but that was in 1636. So we talk about a long time ago, right? So you see the small things being put together over time, okay? But that's not really where the modern police came from, okay? New York followed suit in 1658. Philadelphia followed suit in 1700. Now, if you notice something in common about those three cities, something in common about all three of them is all three of those cities they have a port, they have commerce. And so realistically, those night watches was to look over and to help out the shipping interests, which means those things can be privately funded. That is not what our modern police are based off of. They're just not based off of that, okay? So if you think historically in terms of the police, you know, you get these kind of things that happen. And if you go international, you have things that have happened earlier than that. But I'm gonna stick to the U.S., right? Now, in 1833 in Philadelphia, that's where you get the first day watch. And then in 1844, New York follows suits and implement that along with a municipal kind of police force. Now, again, there's a very focused purpose that they had. The truly first publicly funded police force with full-time police officers was in 1838 in Boston. 1838 in Boston. So Boston, what was y'all doing, man? What was y'all doing where y'all have to constantly create police? Everybody else doing fine. But Boston, you got something going on where y'all was creating police like early on. Like we need to do something about this, right? But realistically, you think about it, and it's really there to enforce special interest. So what you get is in New York City, 1845, you get a publicly funded police, so NYPD, there you go. Albany, New York, Chicago, 1851. New Orleans, Cincinnati, 1853. Philly, 1855. Newark, New Jersey, Baltimore, 1857. By 1880, the majority of major cities had some publicly funded organized police force. Okay? Now, you could call that the modern police force because there is something in common that they all share. And it's really four things here that they share that I've kind of have here, and I've written down to make sure that I get this right to present it to you. They're publicly supported and bureaucratic in form. Okay? Police officers were full-time employees, not community volunteers or case-by-case fee retainers. So this is a full-time job. Okay? Departments had a permanent and fixed rules and procedures. Employment as police officers is continuous. And then police departments are accountable to some central governmental authority. Great. These are the things that you see in common with the police forces that have been established. So is it an elected position? No. Is governing body likely as the mayor in most big cities, right? So when you hear about a mayor firing the police, well, that's the central body that the chief is accountable to. Okay? So that right there is just one of those, just the way that it is. It's just kind of the way that it is. It's the way that it is. It has been established, okay? And every police department that I know of exists in that shape, form, or fashion. At least the major city ones is in that shape, form, or fashion. So every time you hear about, something happening with the chief of police, you kind of always hear it associated with the mayor unless they do something independent of that and resign by themselves or something like that, okay? Now, so it's interesting because realistically, that is the formalization of something. But that's not really where the police really came from. I told you one thing that they had in common is some special interest. And realistically, the police really developed in the South. And they developed as to preserve the system of slavery. The system of slavery is realistically where the police, at least the modern day police of what we know today, where they come from. It might have melded into this other situation of being formalized and shipping interest, all those other things. But that's not what a police truly have come from. Or if you can directly point to behaviors and things like that, that's not where they truly come from. So really, the name that we're talking about is the slave patrols. The slave patrols, okay? The slave patrols. Now, the slave patrols were officially a part of the Carolinas. Now, I don't know, in 1704, probably the Carolinas was just Carolina, one big old Carolina colony, okay? And that's it, right? We're not talking about North and South Carolina, but we're talking about that same general area, right? So we're talking about 1700s, early 1700s is when we really get the first formal slave patrols. And what purposes does the slave patrols, what purposes did they have? Now you tell me if this rings any bell for you, right? To chase down apprehend and return to their owners runaway slaves. But think about it, to chase down, apprehend. If I think about police, I think about that function all the time. To chase down and apprehend. Let's see. To provide an organized form of terror to deter slave revolts. It's interesting. I can tell you this much for sure. I'm terrified of the police. I've been terrified of the police since I've known of their existence. Why have I always been terrified of police? Because of the way they treat black people. The way they treat black people. You know, I remember hearing about D.L. Hughley, and he always welcome to the fold, dog. He always talks about, whenever it is brought up, how when he was a kid and he had a police officer tell him he will blow his brains out if he doesn't put his hands on a car, on the hood of a police car in LA, hot car, put your hands on there, don't move your hands off there, else I'm gonna blow your brains out. In reaction to some other stuff that was happening in terms of the neighborhood. And that's where he got his impression in terms of the police from. You know, I can never say to you that I have had all of this exposure with the police where I've been beaten down and all this other stuff by the police, but I have been stopped so many times and talked to in unsavory ways in terms of the police. Have they thrown me against the wall? No. Have they kicked me, beat me? No. I haven't had that happen to me, right? But the truth is, if I look and I see the police right there, I'm going over there. It is not even a thing where I'm thinking about it. If the police are right here, I'm going over there. That's always been the case for me. I mean, if I see if I'm walking home, I got a straight line to get home, and the police are right there on the block. I'm going to walk around to the back, to the alley, to wherever to get home. I'm just going to do it. That's what I always did. Because I've never seen them. They didn't come in my community as being something that was pleasurable to have in my community. Some communities, you have police officers that are residents of the community. They live in that community. Chicago's different, man. Because in Chicago, like, I have a cousin that passed away recently, and he was a part of the fire department like forever, right? And he passed away. And his neighborhood, like, every house is police and firemen. So they normally go live together, okay? They live close to each other. They support each other in that kind of way. So that's what I know of police, right? I know the chief of police is going off into slightly better neighborhoods, but still collectively, there's several police chiefs that are in that area, right? That's what I see. So I didn't grow up around anybody that was real, for real. That I knew who had that job. No. I don't even know if there was anybody in my neighborhood who worked at any place slightly related to the police. I don't remember seeing it. I don't know. Now, it could have been, but I can't recall in my brain any of that. So these people, for me, as a kid, they're not human, man. They're not human. They're not real to me. Like, me growing up on the south side of Chicago, white folk weren't real because I never seen them in the neighborhood. Okay, let me put it this way. We have one white girl in the neighborhood. Okay, one. Her name was Bonnie. Just one. That's it. and her mother. Okay? That's all I remember in the neighborhood. Bonnie was cool as hell, right? Cool as shit, right? Still cool as hell to this very day, right? But outside of her, I ain't see none of them, man. I ain't seen none of them. No white folks, right? Just like I ain't see no policemen. Okay? Now, I understand. I grew up in poverty. I didn't grow up middle class, anything like that. So I just didn't see these things in my neighborhood, right? And in terms of not seeing these things in my neighborhood or them having any connection with the community, it's one thing to not be in a community. It's one thing to only come in the community to police the community. And when you come in a community to police the community, you're only coming for negative things. So for me, that's organized terror. I'm not saying you're a terrorist organization. By no stretch of the imagination am I saying that whatsoever. I'm not saying that at all. Because I know a bunch of wonderful and great police officers. Male and female. Period. Great. And I'm telling you, if I'm getting pulled over, I want them to be black. When I get pulled over by white ones, it's a whole nother level of just like not that I want. Now, the third thing that was coming amongst the slave patrols is to maintain a form of discipline for slave workers who were subject to summary justice outside of law if they violated any plantation rules. Okay? Yeah. Interesting, right? So, the extension of the prison system now. So when I think about slave patrol, I think about the slave patrol as being a portion of an entity of two things, right? One is of the modern day police force. The other one is of the modern day prison system. Now, could I say that they established the prison system? No, I could say laws and regulations and rules to try to take these Jim Crow laws and create rules that continually just put your knee on the neck of black folks. Okay? But part of that comes out of slave patrol. So that's another one of those very, very interesting things when you think about, kind of the history associated with police. Okay? And that's what I know lightweight, right? So we're talking about yeah, that just reminded me of a story. I remember my mentor, rest in peace, my mentor A.L. Reynolds, he told me about when he first came to Chicago and he got stopped by the police, and he said back in the day, whenever you got stopped by the police, if you didn't want to have any problem, especially in Chicago, you'd have to pay them off. I clearly remember him telling me that story, right? And him getting stopped, and he had to always have some money on him to pay off the police. And we're not talking about for, minor, just speeding tickets, speeding stuff, right? If you ain't got no money and you poor, he has some money. If you ain't got no money and you poor, how you gonna pay off anybody, man? How you gonna pay off anybody? The truth is you can't. Okay? You can't. So you end up in a situation where because you can't pay them off and you're poor, now you get a ticket, but you already poor. So now you can't pay that ticket, which leads to other kind of problems that you have. But this person got money and they can pay the poor because they got discretionary cash. So it's one of those things where it was just always this, as he called it, as he said it to me, he just called it, it's just a tax. It's just a tax. And you got to be prepared to pay certain taxes. And that was just one of the taxes that you had to be prepared to pay driving while black in the city of Chicago, in his day. Okay. So that's interesting, right? So there's this history of the connection of police with slave patrol, at least the modern day police. And again, there's a direct connection to that. But also there is also that formation out of special interest. But really, in terms of the organized, full-time, funded publicly police, they don't really have special interest. Not like protecting a shipping or something like that, protection of a company, stuff like that. We use security guards for that now, for the very special interest. Okay, you're a mall cop, and you make sure that this mall is good. You're being paid by the mall to do that, and you go from there, right? So that's different. But it kind of points toward what the abolitionists say, right? Because the abolitionists say this formed as a system of oppression. And it continues as a system of oppression. Now, can we change that through the defunding of it? Man, that training, there's a lot to go along with that. There's a whole ton to go along with that. Do I have the right answer? No, there are people way smarter than me that got closer answers than me. But is it something worthy of more conversation? Absolutely. Is it something where we can find a model and try to figure out models that work? And what you also have to remember is something interesting, right? Something very, very interesting. Every body of police, so every police organization is not the same. So you really can't take this cookie cutter approach. I don't know if Boston was like Chicago or New York was like Chicago. I'd imagine that most cities in the North was like Chicago in terms of their ability to bribe police, right? But then when I think about the Texas Rangers, I don't know if you could have bribed them. I don't know, right? I don't know. I really don't know. But every one of them is different. So you'd have to find unique ways to solve each one of these problems. And there's no one solution that solves it all. Okay? So unfortunately for us is this maybe is 75% the same, 25% case by case. Yeah. So is defunding the police a real thing? Absolutely. Super real. Okay? Again, do I support it? Yeah, absolutely. Within reason. Because I do understand that opportunity is where a lot of crimes happen. Opportunity, right? And I'm talking about beyond, I'm starving, I need to go steal some bread out the store. I want stuff beyond basic survival, right? Beyond people who just don't do nothing in life and just wants to take advantage of people, right? Beyond that, right? So it's an interesting thing, defunding the police, okay? So defunding the police is one thing, right? But there's something else that I also want to talk about that came out of the Carolinas, the colony of the Carolinas, right? But this is after the Carolinas decided to really become part of the 13 states, those 13 colonies, right? But it's well after that point, too. Because if I bring you to modern day North Carolina, right? Here's something that was said, and I'll read it to you directly. We are just going to go out and start slaughtering them effing N-word. I can't wait. God, I can't wait. Wilmington, North Carolina. There were three officers. Officer James Gilmore, Officer Kevin Piner, and Corporal Jesse Moore. Jesse Moore. Name is so close to Morris. Don't like that. Anyway, you understand my point. Okay? They were having various conversations that got recorded by mistake. Now, I'm assuming it was by mistake. I'm assuming that they didn't record these things for them to be saved by the police department. And they got recorded, some audio, some video of them saying things like that. Just come out. This is not something that is like from the annals of time. This is something that is recent, very, very recent. Another statement. Wipe them off the effing map. That'll put them back about 4 or 5 generations. God. I mean, why are you so angry at us? Where you want to put us back 4 to 5 generations. Feeling that your department is being weak to the whole Black Lives Movement or the Black Lives protesters. Like you're pandering to them. Like they don't really have a right to want to save their lives, to not just be murdered in the street. Like they don't have a right to that, right? These are the words that are coming out of 3 officers' mouths. Now, am I saying, listen to me. Am I saying that this is all officers? No. Bad apples. But is it a systemic problem within the force? I'm not saying this is all officers, right? I'm not saying this is all officers of this persuasion either. I'm not saying that, right? They also caught one of them saying, after they arrested a black woman, she needed a bullet in her head right then. What? I don't care what she did, man. I haven't even thought those kind of thoughts, right? Like, you have to do something super egregious for me to think to myself or to even vocalize to somebody else, man, they should be killed. Like, for whatever reason. Like, if you come to me and say, Jeffrey Dahmer, he should be killed. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can't disagree with that, right? I can see myself saying all kinds of things. I can't see myself at all for somebody I'm arresting saying I believe they should die. Now, if this woman was murdering kids, doing bad things to people, like really, really bad, I could see that, right? I could really, really see that. Okay, I could see that being a possibility, right? But I'd be thinking more like this person should be put in jail. Like, it should never have to come out, right? I'd be thinking more like the family should have some type of justice. I wouldn't be thinking that they should be shot in the head right now for an infraction. I mean, a small infraction more than likely. I don't know why this person was pulled over. I can't tell you why, right? But these things were caught on tape. And they found it by mistake. They found these statements by mistake. From doing their internal audits of some of the files, listening to some of these files, taking a look at some of these files, just to audit them. This is how they found them. So we're talking by mistake. A lot of times when people audit things, or at least I hear about things being audited, it's like 10%, 15%, 20% max. But normally closer to 10 or less when you're talking about auditing something. Because you don't have crews of people. You don't have lots of people doing all these auditing because they got to go do regular jobs. Just wild, right? So realistically, what these 3 officers was talking about was saying something pretty much like, we need to have a civil war. And really, they're not talking about like a civil war like we had back in the day. They're really talking about a civil war where it's race against race. So like a race war. Because it wouldn't make any sense for the North to be against the South. Or North Carolina to be against South Carolina. Because again, their issue isn't with the other state. The issue isn't with the location. The issue isn't with the government. The issue is with Negroes. They called the magistrate a Negro magistrate, right? Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on, man. Now, the interesting thing is this happened back in June, right? In June of this year, June 2020. These officers, all three of them were fired. But think about it, right? Chief Donnie Williams, black, black, right? Black guy, right? First day of the job, he has to deal with these kind of things. They even were talking bad about him and other black cops as well. But they all got fired. Now, imagine this, right? These officers have been around since the late 1990s. So let's just say 2000 just to make it even. And let's just say that's 20 years. Let's say collectively that's 50 years between the three of them, okay? 50 years. That is 50 years of policing people who you have something innately against for no reason. You know, when you start talking about Ferguson, Ferguson, Missouri, where it has been proven absolutely without a doubt that they were kind of putting their knee on black folks' neck because they were policing black folk a lot harsher than white folk. And I divide into two camps. You have the law that exists, and you have two camps under that law. The letter of the law or the spirit of the law, okay? So you have the law, okay? But then you have two camps, the letter of the law or the spirit of the law. And the way they were policing black people was by the letter of the law. You're 1 mile over the speed limit, ticket. And they were policing people that looked like them by the spirit of the law. Yeah, that's wild, man. That's wild. That's real wild. There's this YouTuber that I was watching at some point. Bo with a fifth column, something like that. Okay. Wonderful white guy. You got this southern accent. Sounds very redneckish, for lack of a better term, right? But, got political strength, got a real mind on him, right? And got some real harsh, some real wonderful, great opinions, right? And I like watching him sometimes. And here's one of the things that he said. He talked about a war vet that was outside in the park barbecuing. Now, this vet is barbecuing because he's trying to do things for other vets or people in the community, and he's doing a good thing. And in essence, he's doing a good thing, and he's doing what he feels like is the right thing, okay? And in this park, there's not supposed to be any barbecuing. Not at all. The law, no barbecuing in this park. And officer pulls up and tells him, hey, no barbecuing. You're not supposed to be barbecuing here. Now, the story that he tells is that guy who was a veteran was strapped. And if the policeman would have tried to stop him, he was going to shoot him. He was going to kill him right then and there. Okay? But let's put that part to the side. Okay? Let's put that part to the side. Go listen to the story. What the officer did is he said, okay, look, a new shift comes in. When a new shift comes in, I'm done at a particular time. I'm going to come back here and make sure you're good, make sure you're gone. But I need you to be gone before the other shift comes on. You have the law and then you have the spirit of the law. You understand that difference, right? He didn't go by the letter of the law and attempt to shut it down completely. He went by the spirit of the law. Now, I don't think this person was black. I think this person was Caucasian, like the officer. But that's a great example of letter of the law versus spirit of the law. Okay? And in Ferguson, they were going black folks by the letter of the law. You're wrong. You're 1 mile over the speed limit. Hey, I'm going to teach you not to speed again. Instead of, you know what? Here's a warning. Look, don't speed. I'm not even going to give you this warning. Just slow down. Just slow down. Or even just let them go by with 1 speed over, right? 1 mile over. So that's interesting, right? Because that brings up an interesting problem. And that interesting problem is, I guarantee you to no end that those 3 officers were policing black people based on the letter of the law and not the spirit of the law. And I guarantee you that if you went and looked at their record, their arrest record, what they did over the time that they was a part of that the police department, what they've done over time with black folks, I guarantee you was based on a letter of the law. And I guarantee if you compared that to what they did to our counterparts, their white counterparts, then it would be on the spirit of the law. So I guarantee you that there's a disproportional policing that happened due to their beliefs, which caused their behaviors and their actions, which was the guide for their behaviors and actions. I guarantee you that's what's happened. So now, if you think about, you fired these people, how do you go back and repair what's happened already? How do you do that? You understand where I'm coming from? So my concern totally moves in a different direction when I think about what's happened in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yeah, they're fired. I get it. You know, do I know if they got their pensions and all these wonderful great? Man, they probably do. They're probably going to get all that stuff. But this is when I'm talking about systemic racism. Systemic racism. I'm curious as to what they've taught their kids. I'm curious. I'm curious how they raised those children of theirs. I'm assuming that at least one of them had children. How they've continued these problems of something that white folks made up in terms of race, so they can justify the stealing of property and all other kind of things, right? And the worst part of it is that the most racist folks are the poor white folks that don't have nothing. You know, it's kind of a race to not be in last place, which is a mess. You know, it's like, look, at least we have one group lower than us, black people. You know, Dave Chappelle had an interesting joke, in one of his comedy specials where he said he was in line standing with folks that are voting for Trump and how they was loving to vote for Trump. And he said something like, in essence, I feel bad for them because Trump is not going to help them. Trump is going to help me more than he's going to help him, because Trump is going to help his buddies, people who got money. And, when I think about families, in the middle of Ohio whose jobs have not come back, but then I think these billionaires have made more and more money. So, again, do I think that similar things happen under the Obama administration? Yeah. Under every other administration prior to that? Yeah. Because I firmly believe that maybe I can go before this time. Since Nixon, the presidency has been a runaway train, has truly been a runaway train. And that's another conversation to have another day. Okay? Now, the reason why this comes up as peculiar to me in this wonderful, great city of Wilmington, North Carolina, is because Wilmington, North Carolina was one of those places like Black Wall Street. Like Black Wall Street. Black Wall Street is a topic that we can have, we could talk about that at another time. But it was a community of thriving people early on. So let's draw a line in the sand right now for Wilmington, North Carolina. And that line in the sand goes back over 120 years ago to 1898. Okay? Prior to this place, I'm going to draw that line as being November 10th, 1898. Okay? Because that's when the action happened. So let's draw that line right there. Okay? Prior to that situation, African Americans, former slaves, descendants of former slaves, some former slaves too, right, were thriving. Okay? They owned businesses. They was able to express their right to vote. They were building generational wealth, were able to hold property, had various types of businesses that were thriving. Okay. Educational opportunities to make generations beyond them much better. Winning or being able to sway elections in some kind of way. A lot of black folks back then were Republicans, right? The party of Lincoln, right? Even though Lincoln, that's another conversation to have later too. Lincoln wasn't there to help black folks. He was there to help keep the Union together, right? And you go back and you say to yourself, why did black folks join the Republican Party? Well, back in the day it was kind of flipped. The Republican Party is what black folks went to because the Democratic Party wouldn't let black folks in first and foremost and had the systemic white supremacy. So blacks were joining the Republican Party. And realistically, it was Republicans back at that time that were promoting things like 40 acres and a mule. It was Republicans that were basically saying there is no capitalism without capital. It was Republicans back then that were saying that for our brethren, black folks, to have any opportunity in this land, they have to have some economic opportunity. They have to have something that's going to give them a boost for them to be able to do that. And they put in places things to make sure that happened. It was Republicans. Okay. Now, how that all switched and swayed, I think it was Johnson, Eisenhower, somebody. But after Kennedy got shot, the president right after that, is the one that ushered in most of those civil rights bills. And he literally said, as a finalization of that, he said, I have set our party back 30 years. He literally said that. I've given them, the White House for 30 years, right? And so the Republican Party back in the day literally was that party that black folks clamored to. Okay? And so you've seen people win elections, black folks become a part of Congress, all kinds of things you were seeing, right? Until November 10th, 1898. Let's back up 2 days to November 8th, because November 8th is when they had an election. And in that election, there was a party selected people that obviously supported black folks and black folks doing things, and they helped to elect this government. Now, there were people, specifically an orator or the leader, Alfred Moore Waddell, okay, that threatened and said basically, look, if this thing goes doesn't go in our direction, we're going to make sure that the bodies of African Americans fill the river so much that it blocks the river. I think it's the Cape Fear River. Okay? Interesting name, Cape Fear. I had to research that and see what that's all about. Okay? Alfred Moore Waddell, right? So he actually led a mob of white supremacists with armed rifles and pistols for a coup d'etat. What is that? The removal of an existing government from power, usually by force, and this was by force. This is the only coup d'etat that happened in the United States that I know of. I never believed that things happen one time in the U.S., right? There was no repercussion. There was no retaliation. There was no federal government coming in to change that, or other parts of the states coming in and dealing with that situation. You're talking about the democratically elected government has just been overthrown on November 10th, 1898. And they have a literal picture, like this literal picture of shit burned down, right? Shit burned down, for real. Stuff burned down, right? And they're standing there, rifles, guns, everything. They're standing there, right? They overthrew the government. They told people that they had to leave within 24 hours before this thing started. And when they started their rant, they say they killed like 7 black people. Matter of fact, there's an article in the paper that happened the day after on the 11th. There's an article in the paper. And I did bring that article up. And that article was in the Wilmington Morning Star. And it is literally dated, the 11th of November, 1898. And it says, headline, bloody conflict with Negroes. White men forced to take up arms for the preservation of law and order. Blacks provoke trouble. Negro news plant destroyed. The whites fired upon by the Negroes. The firing returned. The killed and wounded. State Guard out. Many exciting lucidants. Yesterday was an eventful day. So the coup d'etat happened on a Thursday. This was put in the paper on a Friday. It's the whitewashing of history. It is the absolute whitewashing of history. And I go back and I say, wow. And it's kind of interesting because you completely overthrew a government. Rightfully elected, everything else. Just, okay, we're not satisfied. Out. I'm going to take it by force. Okay? So, what happened as a result of that, literally, is you start seeing laws around 1899, within the next year, because we're talking about this is November, so like 1899, now you're starting to see these Jim Crow laws started being passed, heavily, right? Where they are, at the very least, restricting African-American voters, right? We're talking about, they say 7 people, maybe 10, 11 people was killed. Estimates are 90 or 100 black folks died, right? We're talking about the complete terrorization. I don't even know if that's a word. Of the black community there. We're talking about a mass migration out of black people in that area and surrounding areas. Because if that can happen to if that can happen to them, Wilmington, the star, the ones we're looking to be more like, that can happen any place. Because we was going to make ourselves into a little Wilmington, but we don't want to do that. So let's get the hell up out of here. Okay? We're talking about the folks that lost businesses. You know, let's just say somebody stayed. I guarantee you that their business wasn't honored. It just fell apart soon after. Guarantee that, right? We're talking about people completely leaving their homes. Because according to people that lived during that time, because 100 years later, close to 100 years, they had a 6-year commission on what happened and the outcomes of it and everything else. And that's all on the internet, so you go look it up. And they talked about the impact of that. But I remember hearing firsthand accounts of how black folk had to flee to the swamps. How black folks said that the river was turned red by the bodies and blood. You know, I remember, you know, when I went to my first, truly my first family reunion with a particular side of my family down in Broadnax, Virginia, South Hill. We're talking about 10, 15 miles north of North Carolina. And I remember having a conversation about going to North Carolina because I've always had an interest in North Carolina Tar Heels, that blue color, Michael Jordan, because I'm from Chicago, right? So I really, always had thought about going to North Carolina to go to school. And I remember family saying, "Nah, you don't want to go to North Carolina." And I'm over here thinking to myself, why? But you know what it sounded like? It sounded like being in Mississippi. There's a reason, and it got to do with white folks, why you don't really want to go into North Carolina. And when you get that tone, when you get that sound as a black person, you know immediately. It's not like you even need to say why. Because you've heard it before. You've heard it before from someone else. And it's the same tone. The point I'm making is something that happened in 1898 has an impact on us to this very day. Something that happened in 1898 basically killed off an entire black community's progress and set them back generations, like these police officers want to do. Ex-police officers. Okay? So, legitimately, and I don't know the time frame, but I know I've read it, I heard it someplace because I like to watch documentaries and I like to read stuff. I know for a fact that it was decades, maybe 50, 60 years before, literally, I think the state government went all white after that. If you saw pictures of the state government prior to that, you see black folks there. They might have been at the bottom of the picture, but they was in there, okay? Then, right after that, none. And in North Carolina, it was that way, maybe 40, 50, 60 years before there was another black person elected to some type of position that was in that kind of space. So we're talking about several generation impact. That's what they're talking about having. And that wasn't even a civil war. You could legitimately say, at least for Black Wall Street, they tried to defend themselves. But these folks didn't have an opportunity to. Outnumbered, outgunned, not even fighting back like that. It's crazy. So that's something that maybe we'll get into in the future. I don't know. It's an amazing topic. It's a good thing to talk about. But it goes back to why would I support defunding the police? Probably giving you enough reasons why I would support it. But again, I support a fractional percentage of a fraction because I believe the threat of it means something at the very least. So that there can be proper goals and we can kind of stomp out, root out systemic racism. That's what I'm more concerned about. Systemic racism. Okay? So, I don't know where you stand on it. You know, whether you stand in one direction or another, it doesn't impact me in any kind of way. What will impact us all is how we decide to deal with these things in the future. That's going to have an impact on us all. I don't know what the right answer is. But I know this thing to be true. With the massacre that occurred in Wilmington, North Carolina, they put a monument up. And on that monument, it says, if the lions do not write their own history, then the hunters will get all the credit. And the truth is, in Wilmington, North Carolina, the hunters got all the credit because they wouldn't let any of the lions speak whatsoever. And that happened for many years. On that note, this was amazing. I had a good time on this one, and I hope you did too. We will continue to have these kind of conversations and maybe even bring on some guests to talk about the pros and cons, opposing sides of each one of these types of topics. But again, I'm going to ask you to subscribe to our podcast, whether it's on YouTube or you jump on the podcast platforms like Podbean or Spotify or Amazon, Apple, and you kind of follow us there under one of those platforms. I ask you to join us on this journey as we continue to just talk about these things that people don't really want to talk about. Again, my name is Devon Morris. This is Endangered Species Unapologetically. 10-4. I'll see you next time.